Something happens every summer that quietly unsettles people who love their backyard birds. The feeders go still, not gradually, not one species at a time. One morning in late June or early July, you walk outside and the yard that was full of cardinals and chickadees and goldfinches 3 weeks ago is almost completely empty. The feeder hangs untouched. The branches are still. The sounds you associated with every morning for the past 6 months have simply stopped, and nobody warned you it was coming. Most people assume something went wrong. The seed went bad. A predator moved in. A neighbor put out a better feeder. They run through every possible explanation for what they did to drive the birds away. The answer is much simpler than that, and understanding it will completely change the way you read your yard for the rest of the year. The birds did not leave because something is wrong. They left because everything is right. Welcome to Bird Minds. Today we are going into exactly what happens to your birds in summer, where they go, why they go silent, what they are doing that you cannot see, and what one specific behavior in late summer tells you about the season to come. Stay for that last part, because it is the one that changes how summer sounds to you permanently. To understand why birds disappear in summer, you first have to understand why they were so visible in spring. Spring feeder activity is driven by scarcity and urgency. Birds arriving from migration are calorically depleted. Resident birds are building energy reserves for breeding. Natural food sources have not yet peaked for the season. Your feeder, in that context, is one of the most reliable high-energy food sources in the entire neighborhood. So birds use it constantly, urgently, in numbers and frequencies that make your yard feel extraordinarily alive. Then summer arrives, and everything changes. Insects emerge in enormous numbers. Wild berries ripen. Native plants produce seeds. The natural food landscape that was essentially bare in early spring becomes, by midsummer, extraordinarily abundant. A chickadee that needed your sunflower seed in April now has access to hundreds of insect species within 100 feet of your yard. Food that is not only more abundant than anything in a feeder, but nutritionally superior for what the bird needs right now. Insects are not just convenient summer food. During nesting season, insects are the only food that works. Researchers documented that nearly 96% of North American landbirds feed insects exclusively to their nestlings. Not seeds, not berries, not anything from a feeder. The protein profile of insects is simply what developing chicks require. A parent bird in June is not choosing insects over your feeder out of preference. It is choosing insects because its chicks cannot survive on anything else. Your feeder did not become less attractive in summer. The bird's nutritional requirements changed so dramatically that the feeder temporarily became almost irrelevant. But the food shift is only part of the explanation. There is a second reason your yard goes quiet in summer that most people never consider. Breeding birds go silent. The reason male birds sing so loudly and persistently in spring is territorial advertisement. They are declaring ownership of a breeding territory to rival males and announcing fitness to potential mates. That singing requires exposure. The bird needs to be visible and audible from a distance. It perches high, sings long, repeats itself constantly. Once a mate is secured and nesting begins, that calculation reverses completely. A bird with a nest to protect has every reason to be quiet and invisible rather than loud and exposed. Drawing attention to yourself when you have eggs or chicks nearby is exactly the wrong strategy. Predators that locate nesting sites by following the behavior of parent birds are a real and constant threat. So the singing stops. The conspicuous high perching stops. The birds drop into dense vegetation and become, to human eyes and ears, almost invisible. The yard did not lose its birds in summer. It lost its ability to see and hear them. Those are not the same thing. There is a window in midsummer, usually July, sometimes into early August, that most backyard birders walk right through without recognizing what they are seeing. Fledgling season. Young birds that have recently left the nest spend several weeks looking almost nothing like the adults you recognize. They are fluffy and unstreamed. Their plumage is dull. Their movements are awkward and uncertain. They sit low in vegetation, beg loudly from parents still attending them, and avoid the open spaces where adults forage. If you see see a bird this summer that looks slightly wrong, too fluffy, dull coloring, sitting still and making a repetitive, insistent call, you are almost certainly looking at a fledgling. And the adult you cannot see is very likely within 30 feet, watching, intermittently bringing food, making quiet contact calls that keep the pair coordinated without drawing predator attention. This period is one of the most critical in the bird's entire life. The transition from nest to full independence is when mortality is highest. Predators focus on fledglings precisely because they are slow, visible, and not yet competent at escape. Parent birds spend this period in constant vigilance, quiet, low in vegetation, intensely focused, behavior that makes them almost completely invisible to a casual observer. What looks like an empty yard in July is very often a yard full of birds in the middle of the most demanding parenting work they do all year. Now, here is the behavior in late summer that most people notice but almost nobody understands. Sometime in August, often the second or third week, something shifts. The feeder starts getting busier, not at spring levels, but noticeably more active than the quiet weeks of July. Birds you have not seen clearly since May start reappearing at more predictable times. The yard starts feeling more alive than it has in weeks. Most people assume the birds are coming back from somewhere, returning from a summer absence to resume their normal routines. What is actually happening is more specific and more interesting. The young birds from this year's nesting season are becoming independent. Fledglings that spent July hidden in dense vegetation under parental supervision are now competent enough to begin learning the local food landscape on their own. And one of the first things they learn, because they follow adults who already know it, is where the reliable food sources are. Your feeder is one of those sources. The late summer uptick in activity is not returning adults. It is this year's juveniles discovering your yard for the first time. Researchers studying feeder populations across seasons found that late summer activity spikes correlated directly with juvenile bird dispersal. Young birds expanding their range and locating resources they will depend on through their first winter. The individuals visiting your feeder in August are not the same individuals that visited in May. They are the next generation. And whether your yard becomes part of their established resource map depends entirely on what they find when they arrive. A feeder maintained through the quiet weeks of summer is a feeder they find and remember. A feeder that ran empty or went untouched in July is one they may never learn to rely on. So here is what the quiet summer yard actually is. Not an absence, not a failure, not evidence that something went wrong. A yard full of birds doing the most demanding, most consequential work of their entire year, raising young in dense cover, transitioning fledglings to independence, rebuilding energy reserves after the physiological demands of breeding, all of it happening out of sight in the thick green vegetation that summer produces precisely to make that concealment possible. The silence is not empty, it is full of things you cannot see. And when that silence begins to break in August, when the feeder gets busier and unfamiliar, young birds appear with slightly duller plumage and uncertain movements, you are watching the answer to a question that was being worked on all summer in the branches and hedges just beyond your window. Whether the next generation of birds in your neighborhood will know your yard as a reliable place. Whether the map they are building right now in these first weeks of independence will include you. The spring birds you loved were not random visitors. They were individuals with histories in your yard, returning to a place they already knew. The summer quiet is not an ending. It is the interval between the birds you knew and the birds that are learning you right now. Keep the feeder full through August. Keep the water moving. Stay consistent through the weeks when it feels like nobody is watching. Because the birds that will fill your yard next spring are out there right now. And some of them are finding you for the first time. Tell me in the comments, when did your yard go quiet this summer? And when did you first notice it starting to come back? I want to know exactly what you saw. I read every single one. I will see you in the next one.